Hi, welcome to today's video. My name's Paul. So this week has been a struggle, this video. All kinds of technical problems with the sound and the video and the computer, and the gremlins were out in force this week. The actual painting this week is a little bit different. It's going to be a still life instead of landscape. I haven't done one of these for months, since last year. So I thought I'd have a go at a still life. It still has some things in common with other paintings, so it's the same sort of colors I'm using. And like the landscapes, it's done from imagination rather than using reference, any sort of reference photos or an actual vase with flowers. It is just an image in my head. And the image is just a sort of circular blue vase with some yellow flowers. I'm not sure what the flowers are, maybe something like mimosa or something like that. In terms of other materials, much the same. The paper is a little bit different. This is a piece of paper I found from some paper I bought maybe last year. It is 100% cotton, but it's made from recycled t-shirts. And it's a little bit, it's not cheap paper, but it is a little bit rough. It's not the best paper in the world, to be honest. The surface of the paper is quite easily damaged, especially if you do what I do and use lots of water and scratching and using your fingers to move paint around. I say the surface of the paper does get damaged very quickly. It has very rough surface as well. Some of the other things I want to talk about this week was maybe something about materials. So the art materials, and of course they can be very expensive. And are there any ways maybe we can reduce the cost of the art materials? If you ignore all of the things like masking tape and palettes and just look at three main things: the paper, the paint, and a brush. So I did a bit of research on some websites, and for example with brushes, in particular one website I was looking at is, I think it's Jackson Art. I'm not affiliated with them, I'm not promoting them in any way, it's just an example of the website I was using. The cheapest watercolor brush they have on there is 60 pence, which is less than $1. The most expensive watercolor brush they have on there is £600, which is, well, over $700. Basically, put it another way, the most expensive watercolor brush they have is 1,000 times more expensive than the cheapest watercolor brush. So, at least on this website anyway, there is quite a variation in prices for watercolor brushes. You're not going to see anything like that sort of variation with the price of paper or the price of paint. Yes, of course you can get cheap paints and expensive paints, cheap paper and expensive paper. It's certainly not going to be like 1,000 times difference between the lowest and the highest prices. So maybe brushes represent some possibility for maybe shopping around and finding cheaper alternatives maybe. Also, and this is just my opinion, I'm not convinced that the very expensive brushes necessarily give you a huge advantage, unlike paint and paper. So the difference mainly between cheap paint and expensive paint is the pigments used and the amount of pigment that's used. So for example, I love this yellow, this cadmium yellow, and it's very rich, deep sort of color, very vibrant, bright yellow. There are other yellows out there, and different brands have different names, maybe call them something like lemon yellow, but they're cheaper versions and they don't have the same amount of pigment, and they just don't look the same on the paper. Then of course the paper itself as well, yes, you can get cheaper papers, but they're more difficult to work with. with 100% cotton paper that's at least 300 grams per square meter or 140 pounds. It's just so easy to work with watercolor, especially if you're doing wet in wet type of watercolor. Those cheaper papers will just, the surface will get damaged, it'll buckle. It's maybe not even designed for watercolor, so the water and the pigment just seep straight in, and it's very difficult to do washes and things. So basically, sort of rambling here, but I think what I'm trying to say is if we're going to look for savings, maybe brushes offer the best chance of at least reducing the cost of materials a little bit. This is then a scan of that final painting I was doing. I say I was happy with the final result, and it was something a little bit different from the landscapes. Okay, if you'd like to subscribe, just click on the big red button below, and hopefully see you in the next video.